History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of Oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spectacular people. Welcome to this 575th episode of the History Goes Bump podcast, Ghost Tours for the Theater of the Mind. I'm your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this episode, we're going to be in New York again.
We are.
We're going to make our way from NoHo over to the Financial District, which is a location that we visited, Haunted Wall Street.
Looking forward to it.
There's a lot of haunted buildings over here, so we'll be sharing that with everybody. Before we get into that, we want to welcome into the spectacular crew, one person, Kathleen.
Thank you so much for joining our Facebook group.
And now, this moment, Oddity.
Michael Boyle is a farmer in County Donegal, Ireland. While excavating a drainage area on his farm, something strange was sighted. The object did not look natural. They proceeded to remove the item out of the peat bog. Immediately, Michael smelled what he stated was a cheesy-like butter scent. As it turns out, he had just unearthed an artifact known as bog butter.
When you told me that you were going to be researching bog butter, I just went, bog bodies, bog butter, is it like coffin juice? What exactly?
Ooh, bog butter. I'll get some crumpets.
This is an antiquated method of preserving dairy or animal fat. Cool, oxygen-poor depths of Ireland's peat bogs proved to be an excellent way to preserve the butter. It is not unusual to find bog butter in both Scotland and Ireland. The practice dates back to the Iron Age, but has even been used as recently as the 19th century. This particular chunk of bog butter may just be the largest ever found in Ireland, weighing in at about 50 pounds. Paula Harvey, an archaeologist who inspected the site where the butter was found and even tasted some of it, stated, "It does taste like butter, unsalted butter at that. I had a sliver, and I'm still here to tell the tale."
Lucky. I don't think that's something I'd want to risk.
The bog butter is being analyzed by experts at the National Museum of Ireland. There is optimism that the butter will eventually be displayed locally at Kilclooney Dolmen Centre. We love butter, but cannot imagine consuming something that has potentially spent hundreds of years in a peat bog. In our opinion, bog butter certainly is odd.
This history podcast is haunted.
And now this month in history.
In the month of February, on the 12th in 1809, Charles Robert Darwin was born. His grandfather and father were doctors. His father's domineering, insightful medical observations taught Charles much about human psychology. As a teen, his choice of studies were not popular in the English public schools. His father considered Charles a degenerate, with his only interest being game shooting. Because of this, his father sent him off to study medicine at Edinburgh University. Darwin was influenced by free thinkers at a young age, which sculpted his radical views of the world. This led him to becoming the English naturalist, geologist, and biologist that the world recognizes him as today. He's most well known for his theories on evolutionary biology. For the time, his suggestions that animals and humans shared common ancestry were shocking to the religious Victorian community. However, his beliefs were quite interesting to the growing numbers of professional scientists. At the time of Charles Darwin's death, his theories on evolution had extended throughout the world of science, literature, and even politics.
The name Wall Street immediately brings images of financial markets, the stock exchange, ticker tapes, and a giant bronze bull. But Wall Street was originally a wall that formed the northern boundary in the 17th century of what would become New York City. Eventually, the area near this wall would become the heart of America's financial district. Wall Street has inspired books and movies and led to probably hundreds of suicides. It's not surprising that Wall Street would have its share of haunts, because not only is the stock market a volatile thing, but the financial district has a gory past. Join us for the history and hauntings of Wall Street.
The financial district is located in Lower Manhattan and is often referred to as FIDI. Did you know that? I had no idea.
I did not.
They love to give their different sections and neighborhoods
Acronyms and
nicknames, yes. Its northern border is City Hall Park, which had been the site of public hangings in the 1800s. You gotta love it when it's the City Hall Park. Everybody wants to gather there. Why not have some hangings there? And even before that, during the Revolutionary War, Patriots were held in 2 jailhouses that were here, and many were starved, died of sickness, or were hanged. Their bodies were buried in the park, and it's thought many of those bodies still remain there. As happens all the time with this stuff, they go in there to dig around and build something new or plant something, and it's like, oh, look, we found some bones. At the foot of Wall Street, near the water, a slave market had sold men, women, and children into bondage in 1736, making New York, at the time, the second largest slave-owning port city. I had no idea. You would just think, oh, it's somewhere down south probably, right? But nope, New York City was number 2. There was even a slave rebellion here in 1741, and over 100 men were captured and imprisoned in the dungeon that had been located in the basement of British City Hall, that is today known as Federal Hall National Memorial. Many of the prisoners were executed. And just steps away from the New York Stock Exchange is the famous Trinity Church, which we visited.
we did.
That graveyard was founded in the 1690s. Many, many people were buried here, and it got to the point where the sexton buried people on top of each other. Or he dug up bones and put them in the charnel house so that he could bury a fresh body. There are probably 120,000 people buried here, and quite a few are probably unhappy about being moved or covered over. And it's not a huge area.
It's not.
So thinking there's 120,000 people in that vicinity buried, yeah, there's a lot of people on top of each other.
Definitely. But what the financial district is really known for is money. The New Amsterdam settlement that was founded by the Dutch in 1624 would be anchored in the future financial district. The main economy in the beginning was fur trading. The original name of Wall Street was Het Singel, meaning the belt. The British would take over New Amsterdam in 1664 and rename it New York City. The Compromise of 1790 established Wall Street as the financial capital of the United States. The Buttonwood Agreement was signed by 24 stockbrokers in 1792, and this founded the New York Stock Exchange. The first skyscrapers in New York City would be built in the financial district, and Bowling Green would become a residential section with the worst housing conditions in the city. Manhattan is set upon solid bedrock, so building huge structures here made sense.
The first skyscraper would be the Tower Building, which stood 11 stories and was designed by Bradford Lee Gilbert. This was the first building to have a steel skeleton and was completed in 1889. And how did Gilbert come up with such a design? Well, he asked himself, why couldn't we turn a railroad bridge on its end and build further up into the sky?
Huh.
Can you imagine? He's just like sitting there going,
Ingenious.
you know, we can't build really tall buildings because we don't have a way of giving them a foundation and making them solid all the way around.
Sure.
How would we do it where we could have steel and build them out of steel around? Well, you know, those railroad bridges go on for long distances and they hold. So what if we took that design and just turned it up on its side? And I guess that basically really is what a steel skyscraper is.
True. Brilliant.
The Tower Building was demolished in 1914. Eventually, Wall Street would become home to the New York Stock Exchange, the Federal Reserve Bank, NASDAQ, and dozens of banks, brokerage firms, insurance companies, trust companies, and securities dealers. Wall Street has been a route to quick riches and devastating losses like the stock market crash of 1929. With a history like this, It isn't surprising that this section of Manhattan is crawling with ghosts. We're going to start with the charging bull and the bear statues that you find right down near the stock exchange.
So as Diane said, we're going to start with a couple of well-known statues set up on Wall Street, the charging bull and the bear with its threatening paw. People wait in long lines to snap a selfie with the charging bull bronze sculpture that sits in the heart of the financial district. We know, because we did.
We did. It was taking so long, though, to get up next to it in order to take a selfie, is that we just waited until the person who was taking the selfie jumped up and the next person was getting in position and took a picture of the bull so that it didn't have somebody in front of it.
Right.
And it is a complete, full bull sculpture, so a lot of people like to have fun with the back end of it.
Yeah, the back bottom end,
yes.
To be precise. It's a bull, not a cow. Anywho, moving right along. The sculpture weighs over 7,000 pounds and was created in 1989 by sculptor Arturo Di Modica. For tourists who visit at night, they might get more than they bargained for. There are claims that the bull's eyes glow green, and this is an otherworldly greenish glow. There is sometimes even a low growling sound. It is said, according to the legend, that the bull seems to awaken in this way when the market is bearish. And that brings us to the bear statue a short distance from the bull. The bear is bad luck in the stock market, meaning things are going down. Something described as a spectral chill emanates from the bear statue during a downturn in the market. Even on hot summer days, people claim to feel this financial frost. The full-bodied apparitions of two men in business suits of an earlier period have been seen near the statues, and they seem to be in a duel with each other. In Lee Brickley's The Ghosts of Wall Street, Paranormal Activity in the Financial District, he shares the experiences of seasoned trader Martin Weller, who recalled looking down from his offices above the statues one night and, quote, he noticed the figures wrestling by the statues. Startled, he watched as their struggle intensified, their translucent forms flickering in the moonlight. I've seen market volatility, but never like this, Weller recalls. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was as if the market struggle had taken a physical, or rather spectral form. A night watchman named Benjamin Strauss shared with Brickley, the figures seemed to be absorbed by the bull and the bear. Their forms shimmered for a moment and then disappeared, swallowed up by the bronze beasts. It was as if the spirits of the market had become one with these symbols of financial power and uncertainty. Are the bear and bull harbingers of what is to come for the stock market?
Next, we have Federal Hall. As we shared earlier, Federal Hall was the home of a prison during the Slave Rebellion. It's located at 26 Wall Street and was fashioned in the Greek Revival style, designed by Etheliel Town and Alexander Jackson Davis, and completed in 1842 to serve as the custom house. Before that, John Damon's farm had been here, and he sold the land to Captain John Knight in 1685, and eventually it ended up in the hands of the mayors of New York. The first structure built here would become City Hall and was designed by James Ebbets. It served its purpose from 1699 to 1703. There was a library, firehouse, and debtor's prison here as well. In 1765, the building was renovated with a third story being added. French architect Pierre-Charles L'Enfant was commissioned to do another remodel to the building to make it more American after the Revolutionary War, and he added Georgian styling. In 1789, the building was renamed Federal Hall to reflect that New York was the first capital of America. President George Washington took the oath of office here, and the Bill of Rights was drafted in the building. This building would house New York government offices when the capital moved to Philadelphia, and when the New York City Hall was completed in 1812, Federal Hall was demolished. It was replaced by the Custom House, which later became the Sub-Treasury, which held millions of dollars worth of gold and coins.
When the Federal Reserve Bank was opened in 1920, the Sub-Treasury was moved there, and the building served a variety of purposes, including a passport office. For the most part, most of the building was vacant, and this was because nothing could be decided how to use it, and most everybody was against demolishing it because of its historical value. During the New York World's Fair, it held exhibits about finance. And then after a fight and raising private funds, it was decided to open the building as the national memorial it is today. The selling of war bonds and blood drives were hosted during World War II. After 9/11, 300 members of Congress held a session here for the first time since 1790, to show support for New York City and solidarity to the country. Extensive renovations were done to the building right after that, too, as cracks and other long-term damage were exacerbated by the collapse of the Twin Towers. The place has seen a ton of history.
Visitors and staff claim to hear disembodied voices, and they've seen full-bodied apparitions, one of whom is said to be George Washington. This could be residual, as it is often seen near the spot where he took the oath of office. A security guard was locking up one night when he saw a figure out of the corner of his eye, and he turned to tell the person that they needed to leave when he was astonished to see a stern-looking man wearing colonial period garb. He then watched as the figure disappeared into the shadows. Visitors feel a chill near the spot of the oath-taking and near Washington's statue. They claim to feel as though they are being watched. Some people even claim to see Martha Washington hanging out with her husband. So again, this is probably residual. She would have been there for the taking of the oath of office. And Alexander Hamilton might be here as well. They're going to break out into a Broadway play. He had been the first Secretary of the Treasury, after all. A janitor thought he was alone in the building when he heard loud footsteps on the marble floor approaching him. They sounded as though they were behind him, and when he turned around, there was no one there. Books in the library end up on the floor, and objects have been known to move around. Investigators have captured EVPs saying, "I solemnly swear." Colonial-attired individuals are also seen outside of the building. Next, we have the J.P. Morgan Bank Building.
The mysterious J.P. Morgan building is located at 23 Wall Street, and that is what everyone calls the building, 23 Wall Street. This is a 4-story building that had become home to the most influential financial institution in America during the late 19th century. It started as a partnership between Anthony J. Drexel and J.P. Morgan Sr. that was named Drexel Morgan & Company. Drexel died in 1895 and his name was dropped. The bank had been housed inside the Drexel building, which Morgan felt was too small, and after much wrangling, he finally got the Drexel family to sell it to him and he had it demolished, replacing it with the building that stands today. Architects Trowbridge and Livingston were hired, and the cornerstone was laid in 1913 by J.P. Morgan Jr. His dad had died before the building could be started. The new bank opened on November 11, 1914. The building was damaged in the Wall Street bombing of 1920 that killed 38 people, including a Morgan employee. This would remain the House of Morgan until 1988. The building was later owned by Africa Israel, an international investment firm, and then the China International Fund and Senegal Group. There was fighting, lawsuits, a Blink fitness chain leased basement space, and then a 99-year lease was signed by Jack Tersey of a holdings company who defaulted, and now the building stands empty.
That's why I called it mysterious, because nobody has any idea who actually owns the place and what's going on inside of it. It just sits at the corner there. The spirit that haunts the location is none other than J.P. Morgan himself. Years ago, a maintenance worker was working late at night, and he was cleaning a boardroom when a strong chill came over him. He felt like something was behind him, and he spun around and saw a ghost sitting at the head of the table. It seemed to be looking at a ledger. He felt the ghost look like Morgan because it had a bushy mustache. The spirit faded away. Sounds kind of like something residual. A security guard watched a figure stride through the entrance hall one evening. This figure was wearing a suit from an earlier time, but he still thought it was a real person, so he called out because they weren't supposed to be in the building. This man turned and looked at him, and the guard had no doubt that it was the long-dead Morgan. The ghost then disappeared. This crazy account was shared by Lee Brickley in his book. A group of financial analysts working late one night. They were huddled over spreadsheets in a conference room when they heard the unmistakable sound of a gavel striking wood echoing through the silent building. Venturing into the main hall, they were stunned to see a spectral figure standing at the podium, presiding over an invisible audience. As they watched in disbelief, the figure turned to them, revealing the familiar countenance of J.P. Morgan. The ghostly financier then vanished. Morgan may not be the only ghost here. Other employees claim that victims of the bombing in 1920 haunt the building and have been seen in period clothing, and their disembodied footsteps are heard. One female custodian claimed that something brushed her cheek one evening.
And next up we have Trinity Church. With 120,000 bodies in the cemetery, it's no surprise that the church is said to be haunted. The church is located at Broadway and Wall Street at 89 Broadway. Anglican services had been held in the colony's Fort Chapel in the late 1600s, and the members wanted to have their own building, so they petitioned New York's royal governor, and he gave them a charter. The first Trinity Church was built in 1698 and faced the Hudson River. In 1705, the church was given 215 acres, and this provided room for a cemetery. The Great Fire of 1776 destroyed the church. The second church was finished in 1790 and was wider and longer and faced Wall Street. President George Washington was at the consecration ceremony. He not only attended the church, but so did Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. This church had to be demolished when heavy snow caved in the roof in 1839. British architect Richard Upjohn designed the current church in the neo-Gothic style, and it was opened in 1846. The grand steeple rises 281 feet, and this made it the tallest building in the United States until 1869, and it was the tallest building in New York City until 1890. The parish has existed for over 300 years.
The church's offices are located behind the church at 68 to 74 Trinity Place, and there's a pedestrian bridge to Trinity Church. Apparently, employees had many experiences with ghosts in their offices, and many of these experiences were shared by a man named Jeremy Sierra on the church's blog. A woman named Rita saw a ghost in period clothing with a big brimmed hat on the 4th floor in a storage room, and then she saw the same ghost at a later date peering into her office. 2 other employees saw the same spirit on the 10th floor another time, peeking around a corner. In the archives, a box of note cards threw itself off of a shelf as an archivist watched. Alexander and Eliza Hamilton are buried in the cemetery, and Hamilton has been seen near his grave. He also hangs out at City Hall Park. An inventor named Robert Fulton has been seen wandering around the churchyard with a model of his steamboat named the Claremont, and it's spelled exactly the same way as the city we live in.
Goodness.
Comedian Adam Allen is buried here, and people swear they hear laughter coming from his headstone. And why not throw in Captain Kidd? I mean, he haunts everywhere, doesn't he?
Why not?
He apparently provided a winch to raise the stones for the church's steeple, and he wanted to be buried there. He died in London, but somehow his spirit made his way here and walks the churchyard. It's like, you're not going to bury me there? Well, I'm going to haunt it in the afterlife.
Too funny. There is a lady in white that wanders in the churchyard. She wears a colonial-era-style white dress and large bonnet. The bonnet hides her face, but people can feel the sorrow coming from her. Lee Brickley shares, John, a Wall Street banker who lives nearby, recounted his encounter with the apparition. I was walking my dog in the churchyard one morning, just as the sun was beginning to rise. Suddenly, I saw this woman standing by one of the gravestones. She seemed so out of place, like she had stepped out of another time. I approached her to see if she needed help, but as I got closer, she simply vanished into thin air. I was left standing there utterly baffled. And a man in a military uniform has been seen. Brickley shares this. Samantha, an executive at a nearby investment firm, had a chilling encounter with a spectral soldier. I was leaving the office late one night when I saw this figure standing by the churchyard wall. I thought it was a reenactor or something, but as I got closer, I realized there was something off about him. He was transparent, like a mirage. I tried to speak to him, but he didn't respond. He just stood there staring out into the distance. Then, in the blink of an eye, he was gone. I was left there standing in the cold, unable to shake off the eerie feeling that I had just witnessed something supernatural.
And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors. Next, we have the stock exchange. The New York Stock Exchange started in 1792 with the Buttonwood Agreement that was signed by 24 stockbrokers. Do you know why it was called the Buttonwood Agreement?
They had buttons on their suits made out of wood?
Oh, well, that's an interesting way to look at it.
I have no idea.
They actually signed the agreement under a buttonwood tree. I don't know what kind of a tree that is. I've never heard of it before.
I'm not familiar with one.
So, wow, how ingenious to come up with that name for it. Stock trading was informal in the early days. Deals were made in coffee houses and taverns. A formal organization was created in 1817, and an NYSE board was formed. A constitution was also written to govern trading. A room at 40 Wall Street was rented so the brokers had a place to gather twice a day. They had a list of 30 stocks and bonds at the time. Can you imagine only 30 stocks and bonds?
No.
As the United States grew, more and more bonds were added to finance infrastructure. Stocks were issued by railroads, insurance companies, and banks. By 1865, there were 300 stocks and bonds, and the exchange bought a permanent home on Broad Street. Roaming the trading floor would soon follow and continues to this day. The stock ticker was introduced in 1867, and this made stock trading even easier. The opening and closing bell started in the 1870s, and the original bell was a Chinese gong.
I love that.
Hey, let's have the gong show. Here we go.
Oh my. Telephones came to the market in 1878, and by 1886, trading volume hit 1 million shares. The New York Stock Exchange moved to a new building with a bigger trading floor in 1903 that was designed by George B. Post. This is located at 18 Broad Street and features a Beaux Arts style with large colonnades holding up a pediment featuring commerce and industry. The interior was grand with large windows, Georgian marble walls, and gilded ceiling. The gong was replaced with a brass bell at that time too. This was the first air-conditioned building in North America. There also was this new fandangled pneumatic tube system. October 24, 1929 brought the market crash that led the nation into the Great Depression. The exchange and market recovered post-World War II, and during the war, women worked on the trading floor for the first time. Technology throughout the decades has improved the stock exchange. An additional stock trading floor is located at 11 Wall Street and is called the Garage.
Traders and employees have reported unexplained sounds and shadowy figures. There are employees who have reported seeing a group of traders dressed in period clothing gathered around what probably was ticker tape, talking excitedly. A ghostly figure has been seen near the bell podium wearing a suit from the early 1900s, looking very sad. When approached, it disappeared. A maintenance worker was fixing an electronic ticker one night when he was startled by a hand touching him on the shoulder. He turned around, wondering who else was in the empty building, and saw that it was a man in a period suit standing there. The man pointed at the ticker machine and then evaporated. The machine began working instantly.
He either fixed it or he's like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, I don't know. He can come over to our house if we need something fixed. Just point at that, will you, dude? And speaking of a ticker tape machine, there was one that would turn itself on at night and started spewing tape even though it was unplugged and hadn't been used for a couple years. This happened several times, and even crazier, the numbers on the tape were clearly from a bygone era.
Wow.
And the spirit of a janitor has been seen in the building, and it's believed the ghost belongs to a janitor who hanged himself in the building during the Great Depression.
Does that relate at all to our printer printing out those documents that were from a few weeks back, and you've already printed other stuff since then?
Yeah, I don't know. It was so weird. It printed 3 copies. I needed my Spreadshirt tax form, and I couldn't get it to print it. And yeah, I tried to print it like 2 weeks ago, and I gave up, and I deleted everything that was supposed to be a printer job. And like you said, I've printed things since. And then yesterday morning, I went in and I was like, oh, good. Kelly must have printed off her W-2 like I asked her. And then I looked down and I went, wait, these are the Spreadshirt tax forms. And then I was like, there's 3 of them. How the hell? And so I was like, Kelly, did you ask for these? But I didn't know how you would have, because you got to go into the account to even do it.
Nope. And also that same morning, I found a wilted orchid blossom that did not come from any of my currently blooming orchids. Not the same colors. So I don't know where that came from either. So maybe somebody was passing through.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wanted to get our attention.
Maybe the orchid was hiding under the couch. I'm not sure. But yeah, I just thought it was really weird, because usually if you cancel a job and you've printed other things.
Our couch sits on the floor.
Oh, well.
It's not raised. You can't get under it without lifting it.
Well, I guess it wasn't under there. I don't know. Weird things going on around here. Next up, we have the Hamilton Custom House.
The Hamilton Custom House is today the National Museum of the American Indian, located at 1 Bowling Green. This is a gorgeous 7-story building in the Beaux Arts style that was decorated by 12 artists with Corinthian colonnades, sculptures, and nautical motifs. The 4 sculptures that grace the entrance were designed by Daniel Chester French and are titled 4 Continents, representing Asia, America, Europe, and Africa. At the top of the main entrance is a keystone that depicts the head of Columbia. The columns are topped with carved heads of Hermes, and there are 12 statues that personify seafaring nations. There is a ton of symbology around this building.
I would love to just spend hours circling it and looking at everything.
Definitely. The interior has murals by Reginald Marsh, multicolored mosaics, bronze gates leading to a passageway to the Great Hall, and there is a large rotunda. There is marble everywhere.
The main spirit scene here dates back to the early 20th century and is thought to be a customs officer based on the uniform he wears. The full-bodied apparition is seen walking in the corridors as if on patrol. A female employee told Brickley in his book, I was alone in one of the galleries one evening when I saw a man in an old-fashioned uniform walking towards me. I was startled, but assumed he was part of a historical reenactment. I began to ask him about his uniform, but before I could finish my question, he vanished. It was as if he walked right into a wall. A legend claims that a customs officer was accused of embezzling and he subsequently killed himself. A visitor claims to have heard a voice whisper in her ear, "I didn't do it." Is this his ghost? There are also people who claim to not only see individuals in the building late at night when they look from outside, but guards claim to hear the bustling noises of business even though the place is empty. The people looking in from outside know it's strange because the employees inside are all wearing period clothing. Next up, we have the Woolworth Building. The Woolworth Building is an iconic building located at 233 Broadway. The architect was Cass Gilbert, and the architectural style is neo-Gothic. And because it looks like a cathedral, it was nicknamed the Cathedral of Commerce. Some of the decor was inspired by the royal coat of arms of the United Kingdom. The first 4 stories are surfaced in limestone, and the rest of the building has limestone-colored and glazed terracotta panels in shades of blue, green, sienna, and rose. The structure rises 792 feet into the air and was the tallest building in the world until the Chrysler Building was completed in 1930. The interior features a glorious lobby with ceiling mosaics, veined marble from the Greek island of Skyros, gold leaf decorations, and grotesques. The basement features a pool. The Otis Elevator Company supplied the elevators, capable of traveling 700 feet per minute. Whoosh!
Oh my lord, that reminds me of when we were at Panama City Beach staying at one of the Wyndham resorts. Made us fly up to the 15th floor.
Yeah, it was like, whoa!
Our ears were popping.
Yes.
We're not used to that.
And we're in Florida. Our ears are not supposed to pop. The Woolworth Building is named for F.W. Woolworth, who immigrated to the U.S. in 1886. And Kelly, everyone has got to be familiar with what made him a success. I mean, who hasn't heard of Woolworths? These were the little 5 and dimes that were in every single city. There might even be a couple still around. I don't know. There's a lot of these buildings that still have like the Woolworth name on top of them, even though they've become something else.
I went there with my granny.
Oh, yeah.
I did.
And didn't you get something to eat there all the time with her or no?
No, we would go to eat after we would take her shopping.
Okay. Would she give you a dime to spend?
I mean, I remember getting hard candy.
Oh, okay. Woolworth made a deal with banks to get financing. He contributed $1 million, and the bank put in $500,000 and signed a 25-year lease for several floors of the building. So he had a guaranteed renter. So that was the main thing he was looking for. Construction was completed in 1913, and a grand opening dinner was held. Woolworth died in 1920, and his heirs sold the building in 1924. The 1970s brought extensive renovations, and today the building has both commercial leases and residential condominiums. And I think we should go ahead and purchase the penthouse, Kelly. It's available as far as I know. It's going for $79 million.
$79 million.
I'm telling you, that place better be gold-plated. $79 million for a condo? What in the world? I mean, it's going to have a great view, I would assume, but still. Yikes.
Yeah, we're not big city living folk.
No.
Ghost stories have haunted the Woolworth building since its opening. The elevators moved between floors without riders. The lights flickered or turned themselves on and off. A female ghost in period dress is seen in the lobby. She seems to be full of melancholy and is probably residual since she doesn't interact with people. A ghostly maintenance worker has been seen for decades and seems to be going about his duties and usually has a toolbox with him. And a former boardroom seems to host ghostly gatherings. An employee heard the faint sounds of laughing and music coming from down the hall, and when she got near the boardroom, she was sure there was a group of people in there, but when she opened it, the room was empty. And there's this weird account from Brickley. Another intriguing account comes from Jonathan, a security guard who has had a close encounter with the building's spectral tenants. Late one night, he was making his rounds. He saw a light flicker on in one of the upper-level offices. Upon investigating, he found an elderly man dressed in an early 20th century business suit, engrossed in examining a set of blueprints spread out on the office desk. Startled, Jonathan challenged the man, only to see him disappear right before his eyes. The blueprints, however, remained on the desk, tangible proof of the spectral visitation. The blueprints were, in fact, original plans of the Woolworth building, kept secure in the building's archives. And next we have the Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve Bank of New York is located at 33 Liberty Street and rises 14 stories, but also has 5 stories going underneath the ground. Architects York and Sawyer designed the building to resemble Italian Renaissance palaces, and Samuel Yellen constructed the decorative ironwork. The facade is made from limestone and sandstone. The interior has vaulted ceilings covered in Guastavino tile. The basement houses the massive 3-story gold vault that sits right on top of Manhattan's bedrock.
Good thing. It's probably pretty heavy, and you don't want to try to drill up underneath that sucker to
break into it. Nobody's carrying that thing away. There's 6,331 metric tons of monetary gold reserve in that vault. There are 6 other vaults in the basement full of money and securities. Construction began in 1919 and was completed in 1924. The building was expanded in 1935. The Federal Reserve Bank in New York is one of 12 in the country created when the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913. The structure was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1980.
The labyrinth of corridors within this large bank plays home to a phantom banker. Many employees have seen this banker wearing an early 20th century suit. He likes the old vaults, according to a security guard named Marcus. Marcus told Lee Brickley, "I was doing my rounds late one night when I saw him. He was standing near the old vaults, looking as real as you or me, but when I approached him, he simply vanished. There is also a female ghost that weeps. Employees hear soft sobbing and sometimes see this ghost wearing an early 20th century dress. Nobody knows who this woman could be or why she is crying inside the Federal Reserve. Maybe she got fired because she brought the coffee to her boss and it was cold."
Oh, that could be. Yeah,
or she was sent for coffee and the coffee maker was empty, so she had to report back with no coffee.
I mean, that makes sense because I was going, why was there a woman, in the bank? Because I don't know if they were allowed to be tellers. I would assume back in the early 1900s they would have been able to work in the bank.
I was just
being
sarcastic.
But who knows? I mean, the woman sobbing in there could just be she was poor and blames the bank for it. I don't know.
Yeah, I sob when I don't have coffee.
Well, I don't because I hate coffee.
You like the smell.
Next, we have Battery Park, which we actually visited.
Yes, we did.
And we did this in 2020 when we were in New York City. And our main reason for doing that was so we could get a picture of the Statue of Liberty because we knew we weren't going to go across to it because we didn't have time. But we wanted to get a picture of it. And that was the best place to get the picture because it can be seen from the park. And that is why this is the gateway to Ellis Island and the statue. The Lenape and Munsee tribes used the Battery area for hunting and fishing. Eventually, Fort George would be located at the Battery, and it remained until it was destroyed in 1790. It was decided to change the grounds into a public promenade, but the threat from Britain wasn't gone, so in 1807, Castle Clinton was built at the Battery as a circular sandstone fort. This still stands today and is now a national monument. The fort never saw any battle and was converted into a 6,000-seat entertainment venue, and the name was changed to Castle Garden. In 1855, it became an immigrant processing depot. And then, of course, when Ellis Island opened, it moved over there. By 1896, this became the first New York aquarium and remained that until 1941. The fort was renovated and reopened in 1975, and since 1985, it has served as a visitor center and launching point for ferries to the Statue of Liberty.
Spectral soldiers are seen here, and unexplained lights appear. Glowing orbs have been photographed. The soldiers usually appear in the park at night and are dressed in Revolutionary War uniforms. The group of soldiers seem to be residual as they follow the same route. Brickley shares the experience of a Wall Street trader named Robert. "I was strolling through the park, lost in thought. Suddenly, the air grew cold, and I heard a faint sound of drumming, growing steadily louder. It was as though an invisible army was marching towards me. Then, out of the mist, a group of soldiers appeared. They were translucent, almost ethereal, and they were marching in formation. I could see the pain and determination in their eyes as they passed through me, leaving me chilled to the bone. They disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving nothing but the echo of their spectral march in their wake. A female in period clothing from the Victorian era has been dubbed the Phantom Picnicker, and she has been seen by security guards and visitors sitting on a park bench. She has the scent of lavender perfume around her. And the park has a ghost dog that has been seen playing and barking and then disappearing. And now on to Franz's Tavern.
Franz's Tavern is said to be one of the most haunted bars in New York City. The original structure was built by the Delancey family in 1719 at 54 Pearl Street. and was either their private residence or a rental property. A man named Samuel Francis bought the building in 1762 and opened it as a tavern named Queen's Head Tavern. During the Revolutionary War, Francis left the tavern to his loyalist son-in-law to run while the British had control of New York. Apparently, he didn't want to have anything to do with the British. Later, this place became popular with patriots like the Founding Fathers, and George Washington set it up as a pseudo-headquarters. As a matter of fact, George Washington gathered a group of his officers here on December 4th, 1783, to thank them for their service in the recent defeat of the British. He then bid them farewell as he headed home. Right after he made that speech, they all walked down to the port with him and waved to him as he got on a ship and headed home. The museum above the still working bar has a first-hand account of this farewell and has many tributes to Washington and the founders. The Department of Foreign Affairs worked out of the building from 1785 to 1788, and then it became a tavern again. The tavern became a boarding house in 1798, and ballerina Anna Gardy and her husband lived there, and both were stabbed to death in what was ruled a murder-suicide. Apparently he killed her and then himself. Serious fires almost destroyed the building 3 times. In 1900, the building was almost demolished, but the Daughters of the American Revolution saved it. They restored it to its 18th century appearance. It reopened in 1907 as a museum and restaurant. In 1975, 4 people were killed here in a bombing. In 2019, the building celebrated 300 years of existence. That's a long time. Now imagine if they had some spirits, the drinking kind, that went back that far as well. Wonder how much that would cost to get a whiskey that was 300 years old, although I would think after 300 years it would be undrinkable. I don't know. The place just has to be crawling with spirits then, the other kind, the ghost kind, right? A bartender tells a story of a woman who worked at the bar and was closing up one evening and she passed out. When she came to, she claimed that a man appeared out of nowhere and walked up to her and then her lights went out. When the CCTV camera was checked, she had been alone in the bar. A night porter heard what sounded like a party going on with clinking glasses and chattering. And of course, there was nobody else in the bar. Staff members have reported hearing voices and unexplained temperature changes. The spirit of an elderly woman in colonial garb is sometimes seen. Brickley reports in his book, perhaps the most infamous spectral resident of Francis Tavern is a gentleman known only as the Dandy. Okay, ladies, we all know this guy, right? He's dressed in late 18th century fashion, complete with a powdered wig and a tricorn hat. The Dandy is known for his flirtatious interactions with female staff and patrons. He's often seen winking or tipping his hat before vanishing into thin air.
That woman who passed out. Perhaps the Dandy just made her swoon.
The Dandy's flirtations aren't limited to visual encounters. Several women have reported feeling a light touch on their shoulders or a whisper in their ear, only to turn around and find no one there. Thankfully, he's not like grabbing their butts or anything. Over the years, the Dandy has become something of a spectral celebrity, his antics adding an element of playful mystery to the tavern's ghostly lore. One unforgettable encounter with the Dandy was experienced by Sarah, a server at Francis Tavern. One busy Friday evening, as she was carrying a tray of drinks to a table, she felt a distinct tap on her shoulder. Assuming it was a customer trying to get her attention, she turned around, but found no one behind her. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw a figure in colonial attire standing by the bar. He winked at her and lifted his hat in a courteous greeting before dissolving into the bustling crowd. Sarah was left standing in awe, her tray of drinks momentarily forgotten. Thankfully, she didn't drop them. That wouldn't have been good.
Clearly, Wall Street isn't just a place that is home to lots of money. Are there spirits hanging around in the financial district? Is Wall Street haunted?
That is for you to decide. Well, we got to see the outside of a lot of these places while we were down there.
Yes, we did.
Very cool architecture. And boy, if you dig into some of those places, the conspiracy theories going on about all of them, from the Federal Reserve to the stock exchange to JP Morgan.
Oh boy.
You could go on for days. We'd love to have you check out and look at it for days, our website at historygoesbump.com. And if you'd like to send us some feedback, you can do that at historygoesbump@gmail.com. Or you can leave us comments at any of our
social media sites.
Yes, or YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode has been brought to you by our executive producers.
You can find History Goes Bump on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Google Play, and anywhere you can listen to podcasts.
The bog butter is being analyzed by experts at the National Museum of Ireland.
Ireland?
Ireland.
It's an island.
In our opinion, bug butter.
Bug butter?
Bug butter.
Bug butter. I don't even want to know what bug butter is. Bog butter is bad enough, but bug butter? Ooh.
Ooh, bug butter. That might be even better. I'll get more crumpets.
Ghost tours for the Theater of the Mind.
Who are you?
I'm so overcome by your beauty. It just
Oh, right.
paused me.
Please.
It's like, isn't my wife beautiful?
Please. Rose-colored glasses much? And Bowling Green would become a residual.
Residual?
Nope.
Ooh, there's a lot of ghosts in Bowling Green. They're just floating around, minding their own business, doing the same thing over and over again.
Stop.
Or maybe the people who are living there just keep doing the same thing over and over again. Are you trying to say that the people of Bowling Green are boring, Kelly?
Stop it. There are claims that the bull's eye glow green. No, eyes. It's a cyclops bull.
Oh, a Cyclops bowl. Okay. That would make it pretty weird.
Something described as a spectral chill emanates from the bear statue during a downturn in the market. Well, I'll go hug that bull.
When you're having a hot flash.
I mean the bear.
You're like, come here, bear. I'm having a hot flash.
Are the bear and bull harbingers? Harbingers?
Harbingers. You see harbingers.
And nautical motifs. Motifs.
Motives. What was his motive?
I'm still having a horrible hot flash right now.
Mm-hmm.